There you go, mutants. Now, some of you may know exactly what you're looking at, but you don't know the context in which I perceive it. Because before there was The Last Jedi, there was Spider-Man One More Day. I hate to sound all dramatic, but it was everything The Last Jedi became, and then some. It was one of the earliest. There's gonna be a lot of sighs in this this episode. It was one of the single most disappointing decisions that a corporation and an editor-in-chief has ever made with a beloved character, and characters plural in this case. One More Day was a 4-part comic book published in 2007. It was a crossover between the various Spider-Man series written by J. Michael Straczynski, if that's how you say his name, or Straczynski, I have no idea. And under the direction of editor-in-chief Joe Quesada. Welcome back. This is Indie Film Reviews. Streebo here with you. So what you see is, this is the very first Spider-Man book that I've bought off the shelf since 2007. Because for the most part, that storyline made me lose any and all faith in Marvel, especially in Joe Quesada as editor-in-chief, that he had no respect for the fans, no respect for the characters. And, yeah, pretty much that was it. As a Spider-Man fan, I pretty much bought Spider-Man books since my early teens, on and off. And in the mid-2000s, more on than off. I mean, I had an ongoing subscription to Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man, and absolutely loved J. Michael Straczynski, however you say his name. I loved his storylines, and I loved the way that he had expanded upon the Spider-Man mythos and made it a bit more mystical, rather than giving it that kind of odd scientific origin. And not only does One More Day destroy Spider-Man, but it showed one of the major story beats of their mega crossover at the time, Civil War, which everybody's familiar with now because of the Captain America Civil War film, which was actually absolutely phenomenal. That being, at the end of the second issue, Spider-Man unmasks himself and reveals himself to the world to be Peter Parker. And this caused a chain reaction of events, as all of his arch villains and nemesi, plural, question mark, suddenly knew who Spider-Man was, knew who Peter Parker was, knew who his family was, and they all became targets. At the time when I read it in Civil War, I pegged it for what it was. Mark Millar, I don't care if you call it Miller, it's spelled Millar here in the States. It was a cheap gimmick on his part. I read it and I said, they'll never stick with this. They'll never stick with this. They'll retcon it somehow. They'll just push it, erase it right out of existence. Little did I know how right I was. Little did I know how far they were willing to go to retcon it out of existence. This is going to be a two-part video because I haven't read this book. I only bought it, I guess, for the gimmick of being quote-unquote written by J.J. Abrams and his son Henry Abrams. Sure, Henry Abrams probably said, "Hey, Dad, I want to write a Spider-Man book. Can I use your name?" And J.J.'s like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." So I said, well, I'll pick it up. So this is an alternate cover. I haven't read it yet. I just got it out of the bag. First Spider-Man book I've bought in over 12 years. So I'll read it and get back to you, but I'm going to talk a little more about One More Day. And just to set the stage, growing up, I didn't read, as a little kid, I didn't read a lot of comic books. I don't know, I just thought they were kind of weird or goofy, okay, for whatever reason. Now, I like the character of Spider-Man. I was familiar with him because of the old cartoons. There was a fun cartoon from the mid-'60s, and then the Amazing Spider-Man cartoon show from 1981, and then, of course, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends from the years subsequent to that, which was just fantastic with Iceman and Firestar, such an odd combination. But I love those cartoons. Absolutely great. I'll even go back and watch some of them now, even today. And that was really my earliest exposure to Spider-Man. Of course, I at the time, we didn't have all the films that we have nowadays. There was a Spider-Man TV movie and a short-lived series that came on that was live action, starring Nicholas Hammond, I believe, who made a recent reappearance in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, of all things. But it wasn't until I got into elementary school, and the school that I attended was a private Catholic school. And on the shelves, this is in the second grade, and on the shelves they had those digest-sized collections that were small. And they had the reprints of those original stories. They had probably the collections that had probably the first 10 issues of Fantastic Four, and the same for Amazing Spider-Man. Fantastic Four stories being by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and the Amazing Spider-Man stories being by Steve Ditko and Stan Lee. And those were the first comics that I read with those characters that I absolutely loved. I was totally drawn into it. I totally identified with Spider-Man, as the hero who could be you. You! Pointing at you, dear viewer, fellow mutant. And I loved the way that the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man would show up in each other's books. And it was kind of this weirdo continuity. And you realized it was this larger living world. And you're just like, wow. It's like they're in this world. And specifically with those Marvel characters, they were in New York. And it's like, not only are they part of a larger living world, they're part of my world. It's almost like I could imagine them being out there. Now I'm a young boy from, southern Mississippi. Had never been to New York. Still haven't been to New York, mind you. I've been to lots of other places, but not to New York. And there was a way you identified with the character of Spider-Man, the things that he went through. He had these kind of everyday problems. He would catch colds. He had to get medicine to his Aunt May. He had to sew up his costume when it got torn. All of these things. And you felt like you were just invited to follow this soap opera and invest in it emotionally. Okay, and this went on for a long time. When I started finally buying books on my own in my early teens, it wasn't until a few years later Spider-Man actually got married. At the time, I wasn't real crazy about it, but I mean, it grew to be part of Spider-Man. He married Mary Jane. You know, this is what happened. Gwen Stacy got killed early on, but Mary Jane was that other unattainable girl that he eventually attained. And we were invited to be a part of Spidey's story, be a part of Peter Parker's story, be a part of Mary Jane's story. Then along comes Mark Millar and his gimmick writing. I am a fan of Mark Millar. Don't get me wrong. I don't care if you call it Miller. It's spelled Millar. I knew something was rotten in Denmark when they unmasked Spidey. But I didn't realize until they did it, until Joe Quesada forced it upon J. Michael Straczynski, that Peter Parker and Mary Jane would make a deal with the devil to effectively change their continuity, undo their marriage. Joe Quesada, being the knockabout guy that he is, streetwise, street smart, met him once, back when he was just a lowly artist. He was cordial enough, but it was a forgettable encounter. He really wasn't very interested in talking to me as a young aspiring artist at the time. This video can go on for a while, so I'm going to have to wrap it up. But I'm going to wrap it up by quoting from the One More Day interview with Joe Quesada that Joe Quesada had to do back in 2008 because people were so enraged by the notion that they would essentially offer an ending to the Spider-Man story, being that he makes a deal with the devil, that this is what everything that we had learned and grown with Spider-Man and Peter Parker, this was what it led to. To me, it was creative bankruptcy, and it was a failing on Quesada's part. He still won't admit it. Now, being streetwise, he'll say, well, they did it to save a life. That's heroic. He can double speak his way around it. But we know the truth. It was gimmick, and it was a bad one. They could have easily kept the knowledge of his secret identity out there, kept it going. I even put together my own pitch for the quote-unquote friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, because when the Fantastic Four was first developed, their secret identities were known. Reed Richards was Mr. Fantastic. Everybody knew their names. And in my version, Fantastic Four actually helps Spidey set up a neighborhood, and they take applicants for people who will live there, and they install, Fantastic Four Reed Richards design technology to help, protect the borders and whatnot. That way his friend's family could live there and be safe and protected, and he could still be Spider-Man. Now, mind you, maybe that's just limited. Maybe he could have just retired and moved on. A lot of options. One of which should never have been make a deal with the devil. So in this interview, Chris Simpkins asked, given that One More Day illustrated a willingness to essentially revise both long-standing and recent creative decisions, such as those made during the other storyline and Civil War, why should fans invest financially and emotionally in future issues, knowing that similar events in the future may be done away with by magic or similar device, or suspecting that no major creative change is ever made without the intent or plan already in place to reserve it? And that sums it up. You shouldn't, because they don't care about you. They only care about the casual. And they always will. Give this a thumbs up. Give us a like. Subscribe to the channel. Follow me at those links below. This is Streebo, Indie Film Reviews. I'm going to read this and get back to you.